The first time Caleb Ward called his wife outdated, she was standing in the hallway holding a laundry basket wearing one of his old T-shirts with flour on her cheek from the dinner she had been making for him. The second time, he said it in front of another woman. But the third time was the one people in this city would never forget because he said into a microphone at the rooftop opening of the most expensive private hospital in Atlanta, laughing as if the woman he had thrown away was too small to answer him. Sometimes, Caleb told the crowd, lifting his glass beside the woman he called his upgrade, a man has to leave behind a version of life that no longer matches his future. The crowd laughed politely. His new fiancée, Madison Vale, smiled under the chandelier lights, one hand resting on his chest like she had personally built the man standing there. And near the back of the rooftop, dressed in a plain black coat, almost hidden beside the service elevator, stood Caleb's wife, Nia Ward, not ex-wife, wife. The divorce was not final yet. Caleb had invited her that night for one reason. He wanted her to see the life he believed he had outgrown her for. He wanted her to watch him stand beside Madison, a younger woman with polished hair, a doctor's title, and a family name people recognized. He wanted Nia to understand that he had upgraded. What he did not know was that the hospital beneath his feet, the rooftop under his shoes, the research wing carrying his name, and the foundation grant he was about to announce were all controlled by the woman he had spent 8 years calling simple. And before the night ended, Caleb would not only learn that Nia Ward was the richest black woman in the city, he would learn that the future he had bragged about leaving her behind for had been built on a secret she had protected long before she ever met him. Before I tell you what actually happened, please like and subscribe to the channel and tell me your country in the comments. Now let's begin. Nia Ward had never needed people to know she was rich. That was not because she was humble in the way people praise women for making themselves smaller. It was because Nia had learned very young that money could make people honest if you hit it long enough. Her father, Dr. Solomon Avery, had been one of the most respected heart surgeons in the South, but he had also been a man who hated attention. He built clinics in neighborhoods that banks ignored. He bought medical buildings through trusts. He funded scholarships under names nobody connected to him. And when Nia was a child, he took her with him every Saturday to a free clinic on the east side of the city where women came in tired, men came in scared, and children came in with fevers there. Parents could not afford to treat. Nia grew up watching rich donors smile for cameras while her father paid the bills. Quietly, he would tell her, the hand that helps does not need to wave. By the time Nia was 27, she had inherited not only her father's estate, but his entire private network of clinics, properties, research endowments, and medical investments. She became wealthy beyond anything most people around her could imagine, but she kept her father's rules. She lived comfortably, not loudly. She drove a simple car. She wore soft sweaters. She worked in healthcare administration under her mother's maiden name. She let people assume she was ordinary because ordinary was how you heard what people really thought of you. That was how she met Caleb Ward. He was not a doctor then. He was a brilliant medical resident with tired eyes, student loans, and a hunger that made him look older than he was. Caleb was handsome, charming, and so focused on becoming important that he sometimes forgot to be kind. Nia noticed both things. She met him in the old Avery community clinic, though he did not know it belonged to her family. He had volunteered there because his residency director said it would look good on a fellowship application, and Nia was managing patient intake that afternoon, wearing a cardigan, simple flats, and her hair pulled back. Caleb mistook her for a receptionist. He was polite, but distracted. Then a child came in with chest pain, and Caleb froze for half a second because the boy's symptoms did not match the easy explanation. Nia quietly handed him an old file from the clinic's archive and told him the child's family had a history of congenital valve issues. Caleb looked at her differently after that. He asked if she had medical training. Nia said she had learned from watching people who cared. He laughed. That was the first real laugh she heard from him. Over the next months, he returned to the clinic more often than required, sometimes for patients, sometimes for her. He told her she made him feel calm. He told her he had never met anyone who understood medicine without needing a title. Nia did not tell him her full name, not yet. She wanted to be loved before she was researched. For the first few years, Caleb loved her in the way ambitious men love women who make ambition easier. Nia helped him study for boards. She edited his fellowship essays. She packed meals when he forgot to eat. When he lost his first grant application, she stayed up with him all night reading reviewer comments and helping him rebuild the proposal. When he needed recommendation letters from senior physicians, Nia quietly introduced him to people who had known her father, but she did it carefully, letting him believe talent had opened every door. He did have talent. That was the part that made everything complicated. Caleb was not a fool. He was gifted. He could diagnose what others missed. He could speak to frightened families with warmth when he remembered they were human. Nia admired that version of him. She married that version of him. Their wedding was small, held in the garden behind her father's old clinic. Caleb cried when he saw her walk toward him. He promised he would never make her feel invisible. Nia believed him because that day, under the magnolia trees, he looked like a man who understood the value of a woman who stood quietly beside him. But promises made before success are sometimes written in ink that fades under applause. Caleb's rise began with a cardiac research fellowship. He applied 3 times and failed twice. The third application succeeded because Nia found the missing piece. His research was strong, but the funding path was weak. She connected him to the Avery Hart Initiative, a private foundation her family controlled. Without telling him she was the final trustee, the grant was awarded through a board vote, clean and legitimate. But Nia knew her father would have seen what she saw in Caleb: brilliance, hunger, and the possibility of good. Caleb received the news in their kitchen and lifted her off the floor. "We did it," he said, spinning her until she laughed. For a while it felt true. The grant led to papers. The papers led to speaking invitations. The speaking invitations led to hospital leadership noticing him. Caleb began appearing on panels, then local news, then magazine covers about young black excellence in medicine. Nia was proud. She cut out the first article and kept it in a drawer. But she also noticed the language changing. In interviews, Caleb talked about his discipline, his sacrifice, his vision. He mentioned mentors. He mentioned God. He mentioned sleepless nights. He did not mention Nia when she asked gently if he wanted to include family support. In future interviews, he smiled and said, "People want a clean story, babe. Too many details distract from the brand." The brand. That word entered their marriage like a cold draft. Caleb started dressing differently. He hired a stylist. He changed his glasses. He corrected Nia's clothes before events, telling her certain colors made her look too domestic. He encouraged her to straighten her natural curls for formal dinners because donors were traditional. He said it kindly at first, then impatiently. When she wore flats, he asked if she was trying to look like staff. When she spoke with nurses longer than donors, he said she did not understand strategy. And when she reminded him that clinics mattered as much as hospital wings, he kissed her forehead and said, "That's why I love you. You still think small." Nia smiled. In public. In private, she began sleeping closer to the edge of the bed. Caleb did not notice. He was too busy, becoming a man everyone else admired. His mother, Loretta Ward, noticed only enough to blame Nia. Loretta had raised Caleb to believe he was chosen. She loved Nia when Caleb was struggling, because Nia was useful then. But once Caleb became celebrated, Loretta began saying he needed a wife who could stand beside greatness without looking surprised by it. Nia is sweet, she told people, which was always the beginning of an insult. But Caleb's world is changing. Madison Vale entered that changing world wearing a white coat and a smile sharp enough to cut silk. She was a hospital board member's daughter, a dermatologist with a luxury skincare brand, and the kind of woman who knew exactly how to make men feel elevated by standing near her. She met Caleb at a medical leadership luncheon where Nia had chosen not to attend because one of the East Side clinics had a staffing emergency. Madison laughed at Caleb's jokes, praised his keynote, and posted a photo with him before dessert. Nia saw the photo that night because 3 people sent it to her. Caleb stood too close. Madison's hand rested on his arm. The caption, "Medicine looks good when vision has style." Nia said nothing. She had learned from her father that not every symptom needed immediate treatment, but every symptom needed observation. Soon Madison appeared everywhere. Hospital dinners, charity panels, fundraising calls. She began advising Caleb on public image, though no one had officially hired her to do it. She told him he needed to expand beyond community medicine into premium care. She said the future was private wellness, concierge cardiology, elite recovery suites. Caleb began repeating her phrases at home. Nia listened as the man funded by her father's community health legacy started calling community clinics emotionally rewarding but financially limiting. The first real humiliation happened at a donor dinner. Nia wore a navy dress she loved, simple, pearl earrings, and her natural hair pinned softly at the back. Caleb looked at her before they left and sighed. "You look like you're going to a parent-teacher meeting," he said. Nia stared at him. He softened his voice, which made it worse. Madison said, "Tonight's crowd expects a certain level." Nia changed clothes without speaking. At dinner, Madison arrived in a silver dress and greeted Caleb with both hands. Loretta beamed. During the meal, a donor asked Nia what she did. Before Nia could answer, Caleb laughed and said, "Nia keeps me grounded. She's not really into all this big picture stuff." Madison smiled into her wine glass. Nia felt heat rise in her face, but she did not correct him. Not because she was weak, because the donor asking the question was a man whose research building lease was held by one of Nia's companies, and she needed to understand how far Caleb would go when he thought no one powerful was listening. He went further than she expected. Later that night, in the elevator, he told her she had been quiet. At dinner, Nia said, "You answered for me." Caleb leaned against the elevator wall and said, almost bored, "Because you would made it awkward." The affair revealed itself not through lipstick or perfume, but through arrogance. Caleb stopped hiding because he had convinced himself Nia had no power to punish him. He came home late. He took calls on the balcony. Madison's name appeared on hospital schedules where she had no reason to be. Then one afternoon, Nia arrived at North Haven Medical Center to review a facilities issue under one of her holding companies. Caleb did not know she had access to the executive floors. She stepped out of the elevator and saw him at the end of the corridor with Madison. They were standing near the glass wall overlooking the construction site of a new private hospital wing. Caleb touched her waist. It was not a mistake. It was not a misunderstanding. Madison saw Nia first and did not move. Caleb turned slowly, and for 1 second he looked almost ashamed. Then the shame became irritation. He walked toward Nia and said, Why are you here? No, I'm sorry. Now let me explain. Why are you here? Nia looked past him at the unfinished hospital wing, at the cranes, the steel beams, the foundation her money had quietly purchased years before Caleb ever dreamed of standing there. Then she looked at Madison, whose face held the calm confidence of a woman who believed she had replaced someone simple. Nia said nothing. She went home, opened a locked drawer in her study, and removed the first file. Caleb asked for the separation 2 weeks later. He did it at breakfast between coffee and a phone call. He said he had outgrown the marriage. He said they wanted different things. He said Nia was good, but good was not the same as inspiring. Nia sat across from him in a cream robe, watching sunlight move across the kitchen table. She asked if there was someone else. Caleb looked relieved to be asked. That was how she knew he had rehearsed the answer. He said Madison understood the man he was becoming. He said she challenged him. She elevated him. Then he used the word he would later regret for the rest of his life. She's in upgrade, Nia. The room went very quiet. Nia did not throw the coffee. She did not cry. She did not ask what Madison had that she did not. She only folded her napkin and placed it beside her plate. Caleb mistook her calm for defeat. He told her he would be fair. He said she could keep the house for a while since she had nowhere else to go. Nia almost laughed then, but she did not. She let him leave, believing the house was his kindness. He did not know it was part of an Avery trust. He did not know the private hospital opening he was planning was happening in a building owned by Nia's real estate group. He did not know the board seat Madison's father had promised him depended on a foundation Nia chaired under her father's name. He did not know he had just called the richest black woman in Atlanta outdated over coffee she had bought in a kitchen she owned under a roof his name had never touched. For 3 months, Nia let Caleb enjoy the lie. He moved into a penthouse near North Haven. Madison posted brunch photos from his balcony. Loretta gave interviews about Caleb entering a new season of excellence. The hospital announced its grand opening for the Sterling Avery Cardiac Pavilion, though Caleb only noticed the Sterling name. Sterling was Madison's family. Avery to him was just the name of an old medical donor whose foundation had supported his research years earlier. He never asked why Nia went still whenever he said it. He never asked because he had trained himself not to wonder too deeply about her. Meanwhile, Nia worked quietly. She met with the Avery Foundation Board. She reviewed North Haven's expansion contracts. She discovered that Caleb and Madison's father had been preparing to shift community clinic funding into premium private programs after the opening. The Eastside Clinic, where Nia met Caleb, would lose half its operating support. The pediatric mobile unit would be paused. The free heart screening program her father had created would be rebranded as an invite-only wellness initiativa. That was the moment Nia's heartbreak became something colder and clearer. Caleb could leave her. He could embarrass her. He could call another woman an upgrade, but he would not use her father's legacy to build a velvet rope around care that was meant for people who had nowhere else to go. The invitation arrived on thick white cardstock. North Haven Medical Center cordially invites Mrs. Nia Ward to the rooftop opening of the Sterling Avery Cardiac Pavilion. Caleb's assistant had sent it. Madison had added a handwritten note at the bottom. Closure can be beautiful when everyone accepts their place. Nia read it once, then placed it on her desk beside her father's old stethoscope. Her attorney, Imani Brooks, sat across from her with a stack of documents and a look that said she had been waiting for permission. Do you want to stop the event? Imani asked. Nia looked out the window toward the city her father had spent his life serving. No, she said. Let them gather. Everyone first. On the afternoon of the opening, Caleb stood on the rooftop. Terrace in a midnight tuxedo, smiling. Beneath strings of warm lights and camera flashes. Madison wore a gold dress and a diamond bracelet Caleb had, bought after delaying a vendor payment. Nia later covered anonymously to protect clinic operations. Loretta wore champagne silk and introduced Madison as the daughter she should have had. Doctors, donors, hospital executives, politicians, and reporters filled the terrace. Below them, through glass railings, the new hospital wing glowed. Like a jewel, Caleb looked over the city and believed it was finally looking back at him. Nia arrived late, but not dramatically. That was what made it worse for Caleb. There was no loud entrance, no performance, no need to compete with Madison's gold dress. The private elevator opened and Nia stepped onto the rooftop wearing a tailored-over, a black silk dress, her natural hair in a smooth, low bun, diamond studs in her ears, and her father's old stethoscope, pin fastened near her collar. Two women followed her, Imani Brooks, her attorney, and Dr. Elaine Porter, the chief director of the Avery Foundation. The hospital chairman saw Nia first. His face changed. Then he walked across the terrace himself and greeted her with both hands. One by one, important people turned. Donors who had ignored her at Caleb's dinners suddenly straightened. Older physicians whispered her father's name. A city councilman lowered his drink. Madison noticed the shift and frowned. Caleb followed her gaze. When he saw Nia, irritation crossed his face. First, then confusion, then something close to fear, though he did not yet know why. Madison leaned toward him and asked. Caleb said, "They are not." But they were. The rooftop energy had changed, and for the first time, Caleb was not the center of the room. Caleb moved quickly to regain control. He walked toward Nia with a smile made for cameras and kissed the air near her cheek. "I'm surprised you came," he said. Nia looked at him calmly. "I was invited." Madison stepped beside him, glittering in gold, and offered a hand. "Nia," she said sweetly, "I hope tonight isn't too difficult for you." Nia shook her hand and said, "Not at all. I've been looking forward to it." Madison's smile flickered. Caleb lowered his voice. "Don't make this uncomfortable." Nia looked past him at the glowing hospital wing. "Caleb," she said, "you made it uncomfortable when you confused a building opening with a throne." He laughed sharply, but no one near them joined. The chairman cleared his throat and said the program was about to begin. Caleb returned to the podium, jaw tight. Madison stood beside him. Nia remained near the front, quiet, almost serene. Her calm bothered him more than tears would have. Tears he could explain. Anger he could dismiss. But calm meant she knew something he did not. And Caleb, for the first time in years, felt like a man walking into a diagnosis he had not prepared for. The speeches began with applause. The chairman praised innovation. Madison's father praised partnership. Loretta praised Caleb's brilliance, voice trembling with pride. Then Caleb stepped to the microphone. He thanked North Haven, the Sterling family, the donors, and the city. He thanked Madison for showing him what it meant to move toward a future without limits. Then he looked at Nia just briefly, long enough for people to notice. "Growth requires courage," he said. "Sometimes it requires leaving behind what is familiar for what is upgraded." A soft ripple moved through the guests. Madison smiled. Loretta lifted her chin. Nia did not move. Caleb continued, saying the new pavilion would redefine elite cardiac care in the region. He spoke of premium access, personalized recovery, private suites, and the kind of medicine designed for people who expected excellence. Then Dr. Elaine Porter stood from the front row. She did not raise her voice. She simply said, "Before this pavilion opens, the Avery Foundation would like to clarify its position." Caleb stopped mid-sentence. The chairman's face went pale. Madison's Father turned sharply. Nia looked at Elaine and nodded once. Elaine walked to the podium with the measured calm of a woman who had ended more than one career. Without sounding angry, behind Caleb, the screen changed from promotional video to the Avery Foundation seal. No one spoke. Elaine explained that the Avery name on the pavilion was not decorative. It represented a legally binding community care covenant established by Dr. Solomon Avery before his death. Any medical facility using Avery Foundation funds, Avery property, or Avery Research Endowments was required to maintain open-access cardiac services for underserved patients, including the East Side, the pediatric mobile unit, and the free screening program. Caleb stared at the screen. Madison's smile vanished. Her father whispered something to the chairman. Elaine continued. She said the foundation had reviewed proposed changes to the pavilion's operating plan and found them inconsistent with Dr. Avery's covenant. Therefore, the foundation would not approve the opening under its current leadership structure. The rooftop went silent. Caleb leaned toward the microphone and said there must be confusion. The Avery Foundation has always supported my work, he said. Elaine looked at him for a long second. No, Dr. Ward, she replied. The Avery Foundation supported the mission, not your ego. That sentence landed harder than shouting. Caleb's face reddened. He looked toward Nia, suddenly understanding that her stillness was not weakness. Elaine continued, and each word pulled another thread from the life he had tried to display. The building was owned by an Avery-controlled trust. The research wing had been funded by Avery endowments. The original fellowship that launched Caleb's career had been awarded by the foundation's board. The free clinic where Caleb first volunteered was an Avery clinic, and the final trustee responsible for approving any major use of Avery assets was Nia Avery Ward, not Nia Ward, the quiet wife in the background. Nia Avery Ward, daughter of Dr. Solomon Avery, majority trustee of the Avery Foundation, controlling owner of the pavilion property, and through family holdings, the wealthiest black woman in the city. A sound moved through the rooftop, not quite a gasp, not quite a whisper, but something between disbelief and awe. Caleb gripped the podium. Madison stepped away from him without meaning to. Loretta sat down. Slowly, cameras turned toward Nia. She stood there in her white coat, calm as sunrise, looking not triumphant, but disappointed. Caleb tried to speak, because silence would have looked too much like guilt. He said Nia had hidden things from him. He said a wife should not keep secrets. He said this was personal revenge dressed as business. Nia finally stepped forward. She did not take the microphone at first. She looked at him the way a surgeon might look at a wound before deciding where to cut. Then she said, I hid my money 'cause I wanted to know if you could love me. Without it, the rooftop went quiet. Caleb's mouth closed. Nia took the microphone from Elaine. Her voice was soft, but it carried. She said her father built the Avery Foundation for people who had been told care was a privilege. She said Caleb had once understood that, or at least he had pretended well enough to receive the foundation's trust. She said the pavilion would still open, but not as a luxury monument to his image. It would open under a revised board with community access protected, clinic, funding restored, and every programmer father created expanded, not erased. Then she turned slightly toward Madison, not cruelly, but clearly. And as for upgrades, she said, a new reflection means nothing if the man staring into it is still small. Nobody laughed. Nobody moved. The night air itself seemed to hold still. Madison's eyes filled with tears, but whether from humiliation or fear, no one knew. Her father tried to approach the chairman, but the chairman stepped away from him. Caleb looked at Nia like he was seeing all the rooms he had walked through without knowing who. On the doors, reporters began typing. Doctors whispered. Donors stared at. Caleb, with the cold curiosity people, reserved for a man who has just revealed himself by accident. Loretta stood and said Nia should be ashamed for embarrassing her husband in public. Nia turned toward her, and for the first time in 8 years did not soften her voice. She said, he embarrassed himself when he mistook kindness for lack of value. Loretta froze. Caleb whispered Nia's name, not with love but with panic. Nia looked at him and said the divorce would proceed. The clinic protections would be enforced, and his leadership role would be reviewed by the board immediately. Then she returned the microphone to Elaine. The applause did not start all at once. It began with a nurse near the back, then a young doctor, then a woman from the East Side Clinic who had known Solomon Avery. Soon the rooftop was clapping, not for spectacle, but for correction. Caleb followed Nia into the private elevator lobby after the announcement. Behind him, the rooftop had become a room full of conversations he could no longer control. Madison stayed near her father, crying quietly, while pretending not to. Caleb's tuxedo collar looked too tight. Nia, he said, breathless, why didn't you tell me? She pressed the elevator button. Tell you what? He gestured helplessly. Who? You were. Nia turned to him then. Her eyes were calm, but there was grief in them now, the kind that had no interest in being comforted. I told you who I was every day, she said. You just weren't impressed until there were assets attached. Caleb flinched. He said he had made mistakes. He said Madison had gotten into his head. He said success had confused him. Nia almost smiled. Success didn't confuse you, she said. It clarified you. The elevator doors opened. Caleb stepped closer, lowering his voice like intimacy could still be summoned on command. We can fix this. Nia looked at the man she had studied with, cooked for, defended, funded, and loved. Then she said, no, Caleb, I can fix the clinic. I can fix the foundation. I can fix the damage you almost did to my father's work, but I am done fixing you. She stepped into the elevator. The doors closed before he could answer. In the weeks that followed, North Haven Medical Center announced a revised leadership structure. Caleb was placed on leave pending review. Madison's father resigned from the expansion committee. The Sterling name remained on certain donor plaques, but the Avery Covenant became the headline. The East Side Clinic received doubled funding. The pediatric mobile unit expanded into 3 counties. The free heart screening program reopened with Nia standing beside nurses, not cameras. People expected her to become loud after the reveal, but she did not. She went back to doing what her father had taught her. She helped without waving, but now, when she entered boardrooms, nobody mistook her silence for emptiness. Caleb tried calling. She did not answer. He sent a letter. She read the first line, saw the words, I didn't know how much you meant to me, and placed it unread in a drawer. Madison left Atlanta before spring. Loretta stopped giving interviews, and Caleb, once the rising star of elite medicine, found himself volunteering again at the old Avery Clinic as part of a professional remediation agreement. The first day he returned, he saw Nia across the waiting room speaking with a mother and child. She did not look over. That hurt more than anger. Anger would have meant he still mattered enough to disturb her peace. Months later, Nia attended the pavilion's official opening. Again, this time there was no rooftop party, no gold dress, no speech about upgrades. The ribbon was cut in the lobby by a nurse who had worked at the East Side Clinic for 32 years and a 12-year-old boy whose heart condition had been found through the free screening program. Nia stood to the side, in a soft blue suit, clapping with tears in her eyes. Caleb watched from the back. No, maikrofon, no spato, no Madison. Beside him, after the ceremony, approached her slowly. He looked smaller. Now, though nothing about his body had changed, pride had simply stopped, holding him upright. He said he finally understood what her father had built. Nia said nothing. He said he finally understood what she had carried. Still, nothing. Then he said, I call someone else an upgrade, because I didn't know I was standing next to the standard. Nia looked at him. Then, for a moment, she saw the young resident from the clinic, tired and hungry and almost good, but almost good was not enough anymore. She told him she hoped he became the kind of doctor her father once believed he could be. Caleb asked if that meant there was hope for them. Nia shook her head gently. It means there is hope for your patients. Then she walked away. Years later, people would still talk about the night Caleb Ward humiliated his wife at the rooftop opening and discovered she owned the future he was bragging about. Some remembered Madison in the gold dress, frozen beside the podium. Some remembered the Avery Foundation seal, glowing behind Caleb like a verdict. Some remembered Nia in white calm enough to make the whole city hold its breath. But Nia remembered something older. She remembered her father's hand guiding hers over a patient intake form. She remembered the free clinics buzzing, lights, the tired mothers, the children, with brave faces, and a lesson that quiet help could be stronger than public applause. Caleb had left her for a woman he called an upgrade because he thought beauty, status, and a louder name meant he had risen. He never understood that Nia had never been beneath him. She had been holding the floor. He thought he was stepping into a bigger life. He was only stepping out from under the protection of a woman who had loved him, without needing him, funded him without exposing him, and trusted him long enough to let him reveal himself. And the whole city knew what Caleb learned too late. The richest black woman in Atlanta had never needed to prove her worth. She only needed to stop hiding it from a man too small to see it.